You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Just a heads up, this episode is brought to you by the Script Summit Screenplay Contest, where you can win a cash prize or even a contract with a Hollywood talent manager. All you have to do is visit scriptsummit.com for more info. All right, welcome to the Successful Screenwriter Podcast. On this episode, I am joined by a guest host as we analyze and break down a film to discover what works and what doesn't. Welcome to the podcast. I am Geoffrey D. Calhoun, and I am joined with story pro and staff writer at WeFixYourScript.com, Kristy Leigh Lussier. Thanks for being with us.
I am excited to be here and super excited to talk about this movie.
Oh, my goodness. All right, so this week we were... just so you know, we were trying to do an action movie.
I didn't pick it up.
Again, did not pan out. We got the Netflix original I Care a Lot, which is absolutely not an action film. Maybe a little thriller, a little bit of a heist thing going on. Had a couple
of punches and some guns here and there.
Yeah. And definitely some drama and a little bit of comedy. So there was definitely a mix in this film.
Yes.
So I'm gonna hit you with the logline. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. The logline for I Care a Lot, Netflix original. A crooked legal guardian who drains the savings of her elderly wards meets her match when a woman she tries to swindle turns out to be more than she first appears. So good. So it was written and directed by Jay Blakeson, which is cool. I love it when you get a writer-director that really has a great handle on what the narrative that they're coming up with. And this was so strong. I love the fact that he was talking about these guardians that are taking advantage of the elderly, because this is a real thing. And,
legit.
And he wanted to use this opportunity and talk about this, because I hadn't even really known about it. But could you imagine if you are living at home, you've worked your entire life for your savings, and you start to get a little bit older, and then all of a sudden somebody's just like, and we're taking all your stuff now, and you're going to live in some home. That's crazy.
It was not only a social commentary on that, but it was a social commentary on that generation in general, or the elderly generation, and our treatment of them in America, which I just thought was really interesting, the way that he set it up that way.
It is great commentary. It really is. I mean, the elderly woman that they use in this film was played by, I want to say, Diane Weist, I think is her name.
Yeah, I think that's who it was.
Yeah, and she is a fantastic actor. So good. Brings a lot of intensity to this character where you go, oh, this is a scary lady. She is messing with the wrong person. But then brings heart to it as well, which is really cool.
Right.
And but seeing how these elderly people are living in these homes, and then seeing the different types of stations. So you've got these really nice retirement homes, and then you have these retirement homes that are like a step above prison.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I will be transparent. I've kind of, I have family members that work in healthcare and home hospice healthcare and elderly care. And I've also had a mom who passed away a number of years ago, but she went through that system of having to find not only healthcare workers to help her at home, but then towards the end, it was finding a facility for her that she would be comfortable in and not feel like I'm going to a death sentence. And that was the biggest, most heartbreaking aspect of that element. So this really kind of hit home for me in that way.
Wow.
Knowing that feeling of what it must be like as a person to walk through the doors of a facility like that and feel like I'm never coming out of here again.
I actually feel that. So my father had an early onset advanced stage dementia from, they think it was his exposure to chemicals in the Vietnam War. So he was in his late 60s when the dementia, and came on very hard, came on very strong. Yeah. And I wasn't around when it started, but when I learned about it, found out where he was, went there, and he was in this hellhole of a place that always smelled like urine. And I'm like, this is where my father's going to die. I mean, it's just terrible. Right. And then his wife was able to get him into a better place. That is really nice. A really nice facility for him to live out, the rest of his life. But just to be in a place where you feel like you have dignity means so much to a person after they've, worked in their entire life and then just to be discarded. So I think you're right. This is a really good film to show the victims of that process.
Absolutely.
And what I like how they did with this film is there's really no heroes. These are terrible people doing terrible things to terrible people.
Yeah, and that was what was so, I love that. The concept was, let's just talk about the concept.
Absolutely.
Phenomenal. Such an interesting concept. And I love that that element of, it's like, it kind of reminded me like Breaking Bad. So Walter White going down this road of he's just despicable and he's doing something so horrible, but you almost want to root for him as a hero.
Right.
But you just, at what point do you're just giving up your self-respect to do that? And I feel the same way with this one. Worse with her in this film. I did not want her to come out on top.
I know. And that's how you know it's a really good film, because she's not a protagonist. She's a central character, right? So she can be an antagonist. I'd say the closest we had to a protagonist would be the mother herself. Right. Yeah. But even she's shady in a way, because her son is a human trafficker. So you're like, she can't be a very good person if her son's a human trafficker. Right. So she's the closest we can as an audience get to feeling decent about somebody, but we never see her do anything really bad, which I think is why you're able to kind of root for her. Mm-hmm. And then throughout the script, you start to go, okay, she's kind of scary when she tries to choke out the main character. I think it was played by Rosamund Pike. Yeah, it was
Rosamund Pike. Pike. That scene was really interesting too, because we both thought for a moment that it was going to be that she was doing that on purpose. That we thought she's choking her out to move this along, because she knows if she takes another step, something else will happen. And I was very surprised we never came back to it.
Well, I think what was going on, because I think it's multifaceted. You start thinking, okay, let's look at it from Rosamund Pike's point of view, who is the guardian, and she is a master manipulator. So we know that. So we know that Rosamund Pike is her character. I think Marla is getting backed into a corner. So she set up that scene by robbing the old lady from sleep. So she put her on sedatives during the day, kept her up at night on stimulants, right? So then you start messing with somebody's brain chemistry. She starts playing around with other meds, cuts down on her arthritis meds, so she's in pain. Yep. And then she sits down and tells the lady arrogantly, you're gonna die alone in your own filth, right? Yeah. And so I think she set her up on purpose to get that choke out moment, to use it in court to hurt her son. And so it's like, if you master plan that, if you game it out, it's brilliant. But then if you look at it from the old lady's perspective, she's the mother of a human trafficker. She's probably not a great person. She's going to choke somebody out. So it was a great scene. Yeah.
I was wondering too, because I felt like so we never again addressed, her backstory other than, she worked at the same place for 40 years, but clearly she's had this distancing from that side of her life for that reason. So that there isn't, there's not a holding conflict there per se.
No, I think you're right. And I think as a creative or as a writer director, if I was coming on this, I would keep that part away out of her storyline so that the audience has somebody to sympathize with.
Right.
So I think that makes sense, because if we see her like shooting people and things like that, we're going to lose empathy for her as a character, and we already don't have characters to empathize with.
Yeah.
And with. I just want to talk about the character intros. Can we talk about that for a sec?
Yeah,
how we do that?
Do it.
So Rosamund Pike's character intro is dynamic, right? It's VO. It's her explaining the system to you. Yes. It's her explaining her, what I want to say, perverted sense of the American dream, right? Of success, money, fame, power through money, right? and then how you're either a lion or you're a lamb in order to achieve it, and she's a lioness, right? So it's a really dynamic intro. But let's pair that with Peter Dinklage's intro.
I know.
I love it. I mean, other than the fact that I love this man as an actor, but the fact that we come into him, no dialogue. No dialogue.
Barely dialogue.
Yeah, and we just see him looking at different types of sweets, and then he just looks and he just nods, right? He just nods and they pick it, and it's just silent. They guide him to the car, they drive him, and you can see the way this is shot and the way it's written that this is a man with power. This is somebody that commands respect, and I love the differences in introducing those characters. It was so great.
Yeah, no, I loved it too. It was a punch. It was a definite punch when he came on screen in that whole interchange when the taxi shows up.
Oh my God.
So good. So good.
The donut thing where he takes a donut and he eats the donut just to contemplate, am I going to kill this guy? Should I kill this guy? I mean, you could feel the tension in that scene. It was so good. And you can see it where after the guy that he's talking to, he chooses not to kill him. That guy goes to try and save his mother.
Yeah, or find out where she is. Yeah,
and he's not talking when he gets caught by the cops, and he's willing to kill anybody because he is that afraid of Peter Dinklage's character.
That's crazy.
It's so solid.
It was solid. It was this interesting like you're right. There's this interesting dichotomy because she comes out just guns ablazing in kind of metaphorically or whatever.
Yeah, narrative.
She comes out guns ablazing. She's got this huge loud voice. She wants her power and her stance to be known. And nobody has a problem speaking, in terms of kind of for her. But then this other character who probably commands much more power than she does.
Right.
Doesn't have to say a word, and everybody that works for him won't say a word. It was crazy. It was just like this really interesting.
Oh, I know. It's a great pair of antagonists, or I guess, antagonists, and call her protagonist, but to pair off of, because you have somebody who is very loud, who is very in your face, who is very manipulative, right? And then you have somebody who is quietly confident in his entire world. And then to put those two against each other, I mean, even in the scene where she's got the bag around her face, and his man is choking her out in the middle of, I think, like a desert or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he rips the bag open to show that he's the one in control, and then she very arrogantly and cockily, just says, is that how you're going to say hello? And then you can see that weigh on him because he doesn't want to do any of this. He wants to just run his business, get his mom back.
Yeah.
Oh man,
it was good. Brilliant. It was just so good. It was so good.
So I love it. What do you think about because gender is a role in this film, and I want to get your take on it because it's mostly a female dominated film. I mean, there's only a couple of male characters, and there's even that subplot of being a woman in a man's world, and then the economy of power there, especially with her and the very first guy that she swindled his mother out of her money and locked her into a home, and he couldn't even see her. And this is like the very first moment we learn how crooked she is. He spits in her face, and then he calls her all of the typical words.
Right.
And then she gets right back in his face.
Yeah. So we were just talking about this too, and I said I found it really interesting because I started to, halfway through watching it, not even necessarily think about the gender aspect. It really started to fade in my mind because she was able to hold her own in this world. And so I lost that kind of line division between male and female. But what I really was kind of struggling with was the fact that she did come out at the very beginning, and she just right out the gate was like, you're upset because I'm a woman and because I beat you. And there was no, even as the story kind of continued and those elements and thoughts in her brain came out in terms of this is why she's doing what she's doing. There was never really an explanation as to why. So I really kind of was like, well, why is it such a big deal? Like, like what's this big deal about your bias against men versus just your bias against crooked people who now you've turned into?
So maybe her motivation isn't about sex. She just uses it as an excuse to continue doing the things that she's doing because she just wants to succeed.
Right. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Like the best, I think honestly, the best moment, or one of the best moments in the film, is when she's sitting and she is talking to him after he's kind of ripped the bag off of her head.
Right.
And she's just so completely nonchalant, extremely raw and transparent, and just says, I just want power. I just want money and power. Like there was no. Yeah.
Very, very cut and dry. I mean, not a lot of subtext there, but that part of the film would be the, it's not the midpoint. It was the sacrifice. That was the part. It was the sacrifice of herself where she's thrown in the water and she willingly does it, because the really interesting thing about this character is the refusal to change. She will not change as a character. Yes. She will not change as a person. She will not grow as a character. And this is what I like about that, because they show it. It is the scene where she loses her tooth.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is really interesting, right?
This woman survived an assassination attempt where they tried to kill her. She's freezing. She's walking down a cold road. She pulls into some gas station somewhere run by some dude, and she grabs clothes. And like the first thing she does is she takes the tooth that she lost, throws it in a vat of milk. And I'm thinking, what the hell is going on? Right? Why is this tooth so important to her? Right? But then when we see later on that she's having the tooth put back in, now we understand this is a person who will not change who they are at all. And so what I'm thinking is like, this is not going to end well for this woman. This is not going to end well. And it was such a beautiful approach.
Yeah. And even the girlfriend says, or I'm not sure if they were married at the time, but even the girlfriend says, like, you know, we've got to go, like, pack your bag. We have to leave. And she still wouldn't listen.
Right. Yeah.
She kind of did, but she wouldn't listen. And it took her actually finding her in the house on the ground, pretty much about to die, before we do see that element of you know, a bit of a shift. But she still says, I got a plan so I could or she's leaving it up to somebody else to make that choice.
I don't think she is. See, she is a master manipulator, right? I feel she was guiding that conversation with her lover, saying, we could leave whenever you want to leave.
Right.
But I have this plan, right? So it's like, you're not really saying we can leave.
Yeah.
You know, you're just trying to be nice and let me pretend like I have a say in this relationship, which there are relationships like that. So
for sure.
Again, beautifully written. Now, they talk about the Milgram Experiment. Are you familiar with the Milgram Experiment?
No, I mean, I've heard it, and then when I heard it again, it triggered in my brain to read more about it.
So the Milgram Experiment was scientists wanted to explain how atrocities can happen en masse by normal people who are not, you know, brainwashed into like terrorism or anything like that. And it started with like, you know, Holocaust and things like that. So what they did is they hooked up like one person to a buzzer, and they hooked up another person to electrodes, and then you were directed by a person of authority to shock that person. And so they started shocking him. Fine, no problem. But then they started upping the voltage. And this is where it gets interesting. When people were taught, I think it was like 78% of the time, Kristy, the more shocks, the more the more powerful of the shock, the more uncomfortable people were to do it, but they still did it.
And
then they got to a voltage that could kill a person, right? And then under being yelled at by an authoritative figure, they still did the shock.
Wow, that's crazy.
Which says a lot about how having authority can really imply compliance, which explains how these elderly people, when you show up with a couple of cops and a piece of paper,
they just comply. Yeah,
they just walk out. They don't close the door. That's when you start going, okay, so close that door and lock it. You better be. So I thought that was really interesting that they used that, because you can see how that really explains, I mean, the psychology behind why this works and why people can be taken advantage of.
Yeah, and it's just sad. I mean, again, it's just, I know we talked about it, but it's just that sad element of that's what ends up happening to a lot of these people.
Oh my God, it breaks my heart. So what do you think about the midpoint where the old woman, whose name I think was Jennifer, is getting free? So she got broke out of the care facility by the Russian mob. They killed a couple of people to get her out. I was like, whoa, this is going in a crazy direction. This is fun, right? And so she's getting closer to the car where she can see her son, he can see her. And then Rosamund Pike's character comes in and knocks her out, and they all get arrested. And I was like, what a great midpoint.
Yeah. It was really fascinating too, because you think there's this ache in you that's like, just open the door and get your mother.
Get your mom. Yeah.
Get your mom.
Exactly.
But there again, that this element of like, there's been this complete rule of thumb, like silent rule that like, we will not do this no matter what, because at what risk will that be to either you or to him?
Yeah. Yep.
He's not going to risk
he can't expose himself.
what he has. Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Oh man. But you could feel it though. What a powerful scene.
Yeah, but it's not like she was screaming and crying and like, "Why aren't you saving me?" She went.
No, it was the desperation where she was like almost reaching out for her son, and then you could see the worlds crumble. And I was like, "Oh man, these are terrible. These are terrible people, and I'm being moved."
I hate it. But again, like it was really interesting too, because that was like his weakness. His weakness was her. I mean, every time he even just thought about it, and oh God, Dinklage did such an amazing job.
He was so good.
His mouth would tremble. You could tell his eyes were welling, like he wants to cry about the fact that it's his mom and you can't save her.
A character like that, he brought so much depth to it, because a character like that could be so one note. It could be so evil Russian bad guy dude. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, no, I'm going to add humanity to this character. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he added, that Zen type of piece that he's going for, which is wild if you think about the fact that he's a human trafficker.
But he's like, I just like to remain calm, and
it's against type.
But I love it. Like that again, the face off between them when he's got her captured and takes the bag off. Yeah. I mean, he just sits and he just absorbs and observes and just listens and doesn't freak out, doesn't whatever. And it's just so priceless. It's so good.
If you're developing character, I would watch this film and take away how they show the characters doing physical action and how that reinforces who they are, right? Because her character, when she's exercising, it's dynamic exercises.
Right.
She's doing the row. She's doing the in-depth, bicycle class under the hot lights and all of that crazy stuff. She's on the cycle. He's doing quiet, the rings, the iron bars that gymnastics use. Yeah. And then there's classical music playing.
And he's not even moving.
He's not even moving. They're exact opposite characters, but by showing us who they are, we learn who they are. And this is a great, you could really break this down just for how they show the characters, which is fantastic.
Oh, you can have a whole nother dialogue about cinematography wise. And you're right, how they staged each scene, the coloring, the choices of costume that they were wearing, the colors of the costume, just everything.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's great. And even watching Rosamund Pike's character, she physically transforms. Her hair always stays the same, but clothing wise, she physically, they show her, show her adapt throughout the story until she ends up in pure white. And you're going, and they're trying to allude that she's won. It's a happy ending. She's this big, powerful figure. And then, of course,
yes, the ending.
Bam. Yeah, the real ending, she's assassinated by the very first guy whose mother she...
So let's talk about that, because how do you feel about this ending?
It's for me, it's warranted. I think if this is a film about people being taken advantage of and that industry itself, I think it's a warning of what can happen. Personally, I think that it's showing that in the end, you're not going to get shot, but it's showing that in the end, what you're doing has ramifications, right? Yeah. You're not going to get away with being evil. And I mean, I liked that. I thought that was a good,
Yeah, I think it was, I don't think the ending, this is going to sound really strange.
Okay.
I don't think the ending was for the character. I think the ending was for the audience.
Ah, that's a good question. That's a good observation. I think the audience
needed that closure because, you know, it kind of a little tiny bit went off the rails when Dinklage's character's like, let's just go into business together. Okay, we're all going to win and we're all going to move on. And it just felt too easy. And so that ending where she does get shot really feels like it's more for the audience because she was very distinct to say several times that she wasn't afraid to die and she knew that time would come.
Right.
And that element didn't matter. That wasn't the fear driving
some foreshadowing.
Yeah. So it was her losing, but she didn't lose. Even when she was shot,
didn't lose. You're
she
right.
didn't lose.
Yeah.
So I feel like that ending was more for the audience versus the character aspect of it.
I think that's a great note and a great observation. And looking at it from that perspective, I think you're probably right. Because I walked away going, all right, it's good to know that evil didn't win today.
Yeah, but then I'm like, but she did. Like,
yeah, but she did. And then at the same time, the company that she ran is still going.
Yep.
It's probably moved on. Yeah,
right?
it probably moved on to her wife, right? Who took over. Right. So it doesn't really end per se. I think I read somewhere where the director had compared it to like the heads of a hydra, which makes a lot of sense if you think about it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Wow.
Yeah, but I think that character driven, so driven to succeed and won't let anything stop her. And you got to admire that, but at the same time, as Peter Dinklage says, it's terrifying.
It is terrifying. It is terrifying. And there's one other thing that I'm just going to throw out there before we're done. I just mentioned this because we were kind of talking about it after we watched it. I said, what's really interesting to me is one of the most powerful characters in the film was the judge.
Yeah.
And here's why. We knew that the doctor was in on it and kind of behind it. And obviously the care facility that she works a lot in close contact with a lot of these people. But we never got the explanation of, is this judge really working with her? Because it's very, very hard to think that a judge who keeps hearing over and over again the same issues about the same person would just be comfortable with, okay, what's going on here? And he never questioned her. He always let her interrupt. He always let her overtake what the other person was saying. And those judges, when they sign that paperwork, it's powerless. It's a powerless feeling to know that the law is saying this is what you have to do.
I would say the judge probably represents the system itself.
Exactly. That's what I was going to get at.
A dispassionate system that doesn't question anything and then takes whatever someone says that has a bit of authority for its word. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. And the fact that she was able to manipulate this man and take advantage of the system, I say that's the best kind of breakdown I could give you on that.
Yeah, no, that was exactly what I was getting at, was that I felt that that's what it was. Yeah.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Mm-hmm. All right, so that is our breakdown or film analysis of I Care a Lot. If anybody has any questions, you can always feel free to pop them into the comments there. And Leonard says, I think we need a bigger boat. I'm not sure. Was that a line in the movie? No?
That might be my dad.
Okay.
Because he likes to watch us.
Welcome, Leonard. I'm a fan of your daughter. She's pretty great.
He is referencing the movie Jaws because it's my favorite movie.
Okay.
And one of the first, I think, probably the best screenplay ever written. So he's just giving me a hint that he just believes in me.
Okay. Well, we believe in her too. Hence, she's on the show.
Thanks, Dad. I love you.
All right. Well, Dad, if you got a quote for me, throw it up there. My favorite film is any of the Star Wars. So let's see if anything else. Oh, thank you, Teddy, for your comments. It's very kind. Well, I don't see anything else, and that's fine. This episode is brought to you by the Script Summit Screenplay Contest, where you can win a cash prize or the chance to have a contract with a Hollywood talent manager. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share in your social media where you can tag us at The Successful Screenwriter.